But Section 4.7b clearly states, Mrs. Pemberton, the HOA doesn't override county permits. If they filed proper paperwork with the county and it was approved, they're within their rights to maintain their pool as they see fit. After Officer Thompson left, Karen sat in her living room staring at her war room setup. 3 hours of work, 14 phone calls, and a dining room that looked like a conspiracy theorist's dream, all based on what was apparently legitimate pool maintenance. But something didn't sit right. In 15 years of HOA presidency, no one had ever filed pool maintenance permits without consulting her first. It was an unwritten rule, a matter of courtesy and community respect. The Martinez family had deliberately circumvented her authority, and that was unforgivable. She marched across the street with renewed purpose, her heels clicking against the pavement like a judge's gavel. This time, when she rang the doorbell, she was prepared for a different kind of conversation. "Mr. Martinez," she said when he opened the door, her voice carefully controlled, but simmering with barely contained fury. "We need to talk." Miguel stepped onto his porch, closing the door behind him, a gesture that didn't go unnoticed by Karen. "Mrs. Pemberton, I think Officer Thompson explained everything pretty clearly. Having permits doesn't excuse the fact that you deliberately went around the HOA board. In 15 years, no one has ever begun major pool work without notifying the community first. It's a matter of courtesy." "With respect, Mrs. Pemberton, courtesy is a two-way street." Miguel's voice was calm, but Karen caught an edge that hadn't been there this morning. "Last year, you delayed our fence repair for 3 months over a 6-inch height dispute. The year before that, you made us repaint our front door twice because the first shade of blue wasn't community appropriate. We decided to handle this one through official channels instead." Karen felt heat rising in her chest. Those delays were necessary to maintain property values and community standards. Those delays cost us thousands of dollars in contractor fees and seasonal scheduling. Miguel's composure was cracking now, his voice rising slightly. "We followed every rule, met every requirement, and you still found reasons to object. So yes, this time we went through the county instead of dealing with HOA bureaucracy." Bureaucracy. The word hit Karen like a slap. "I'll have you know that bureaucracy is what keeps this neighborhood from turning into a free-for-all where anyone can do anything they want. And I'll have you know that we've lived here for 8 years and followed every single one of your rules without complaint until now," Miguel shot back. "But we're done asking permission for every minor thing we do to our own property." As Karen walked back to her house, her mind raced with implications. This wasn't just about the Martinez family anymore. This was about a dangerous precedent being set. If homeowners started going around the HOA for routine matters, the entire system would collapse. Property values would plummet. Chaos would reign. She had to make sure this never happened again. By Thursday morning, Karen had called an emergency HOA board meeting, scheduled for 7 p.m. at the community center. She'd spent the previous evening crafting what she considered her masterpiece, a comprehensive proposal to strengthen pool maintenance oversight and create penalties for residents who bypassed HOA consultation. The community center felt electric with tension as residents filed in. Karen had expected the usual crowd of 7 or 8 regulars, but tonight 23 people had shown up, the largest attendance in 5 years. "Good evening, everyone," Karen began, standing at the podium she'd specifically requested for tonight's meeting. "We're here to address a serious breach of community protocol that threatens the very foundation of our neighborhood standards." She clicked to her first PowerPoint slide, a photo of the Martinez pool, dramatically lit, and zoomed in to emphasize the empty concrete. "What you're looking at is what happens when residents decide they can operate outside established community procedures." But as Karen continued her presentation, something unexpected happened. The audience wasn't nodding in agreement. Instead, she was met with crossed arms, sideways glances, and what looked suspiciously like eye rolls. "Mrs. Pemberton," interrupted Dave Chen, Linda's husband and a usually quiet board member. "Didn't the Martinez family follow all legal requirements for their pool maintenance?" "Legal requirements are the bare minimum," Karen replied, clicking to her next slide showing HOA violation statistics. Community standards require. With respect, another voice called out from the back. Maybe our community standards need updating. Karen Pemberton's morning coffee mug shattered against her pristine kitchen tiles as she stared out her window at the most horrifying sight of her 15-year tenure as Willowbrook HOA president. The Martinez family's backyard pool, a pool she'd spent 3 months fighting in committee meetings, was completely drained, its blue bottom exposed like a wound in the earth. "Rachel," she shrieked, her voice cracking like a whip through the house. Her husband stumbled into the kitchen, still in his bathrobe, to find Karen frantically rifling through her filing cabinet with the intensity of a woman possessed. "Where's the Martinez file? Where is it?" "Karen, it's 6:30 in the morning." 6:32. She snapped, brandishing her phone like a weapon. And at 6:15 those vandals committed the most egregious violation in HOA history. Her perfectly manicured finger jammed toward the window. "Look at that monstrosity. It's an environmental disaster, a safety hazard, a complete and utter desecration of our community standards." Richard squinted through the window at what appeared to be a normal, albeit empty, swimming pool. "Honey, maybe they're just cleaning it." The look Karen shot him could have stripped paint. She'd already pulled out her emergency HOA binder, a 3-inch thick tome she'd compiled over the years, complete with color-coded tabs and laminated reference sheets. Her finger traced down the pool maintenance regulations with surgical precision. Section 4.7b clearly states that any pool maintenance requiring complete drainage must be approved by the HOA board with a minimum 48-hour notice, she recited, her voice gaining momentum like a train picking up speed. They've violated not just the drainage policy, but also the environmental impact clause, the aesthetic maintenance standards, and the neighborhood notification requirements. She was already reaching for her phone, scrolling through her contacts to the Martinez number with practiced efficiency. The phone rang once, twice. "You've reached the Martinez family. We can't come to the phone right now." "Oh, they can't come to the phone?" Karen's voice rose to a pitch that made the neighbor's dog start barking. "Well, they're about to wish they had." Within minutes, she was dressed in her favorite power suit, navy blue with shoulder pads that meant business, and marching across the street with her emergency citation book in hand. Her heels clicked against the pavement like a countdown timer, each step deliberate and furious. The Martinez house looked peaceful in the early morning light, completely unaware of the storm about to descend upon it. Karen rang the doorbell with the persistence of a woodpecker, holding the button down in 3-second intervals that echoed through the neighborhood like an air raid siren. When Miguel Martinez finally opened the door, bleary-eyed and confused, Karen was ready with her opening salvo. "Mr. Martinez, I'm here regarding the catastrophic violation currently festering in your backyard. This is a formal notice of violation, and I'll be filing a complaint with the County Environmental Office within the hour." "Mrs. Pemberton, it's not even 7 in the morning. The time for civilized discussion has passed," Karen declared, thrusting the citation toward him with the authority of someone serving a court summons. "Your blatant disregard for community standards ends today." As she turned on her heel and marched back toward her house, her mind was already 3 steps ahead, formulating her next move. This wasn't just about a pool anymore. This was about the very foundation of civilized society. And Karen Pemberton was going to make sure justice was served, no matter what it took. By 8 a.m., Karen had transformed her dining room into a war room that would make military strategists jealous. The mahogany table was covered with printed HOA bylaws, aerial photos she'd pulled from Google Earth, and a hand-drawn diagram of the Martinez property complete with measurements she'd estimated from her kitchen window. Phase 1. Documentation, she muttered to herself, adjusting her reading glasses as she made notations in red ink. She'd already called in sick to her job at the county clerk's office, a decision that would have shocked anyone who knew about her perfect attendance record. But desperate times called for desperate measures. Her phone buzzed with a text from her neighbor, Linda Chen. "Karen, saw you marching around early this morning. Everything okay?" Karen's fingers flew across her keyboard in response. "Linda, I need you to be my eyes and ears today. The Martinez situation has escalated beyond a simple violation. Document everything. Every person who enters their property, every vehicle, every activity. I'll make it worth your while at the next bunko night. Within an hour, Karen had received responses from 3 other neighbors, all now enlisted as her unofficial surveillance team. Mrs. Henderson from 2 houses down reported seeing a pool cleaning truck at 7:15 a.m. Bob Martinez from across the street, no relation to the violators, thankfully, confirmed seeing suspicious activity involving what looked like pool equipment. But it was Linda's 10 a.m. update that sent Karen into overdrive. 3 men in work clothes just showed up with a cement mixer. Repeat, cement mixer. This is not a drill. Karen nearly choked on her second cup of coffee. A cement mixer could only mean one thing. They were planning to make the violation permanent by filling in the pool entirely. This was worse than she'd imagined. This was war. She speed-dialed the county environmental office with the urgency of someone reporting a nuclear meltdown. Environmental Services, this is Janet. Janet, this is Karen Pemberton from the Willowbrook HOA. I need to report an immediate environmental violation in progress at 247 Maple Drive. The residents have drained an entire swimming pool without permits and are now attempting to fill it with concrete. This could contaminate the groundwater, destabilize the surrounding soil, and… Ma'am, slow down. You said they're filling a pool with concrete. The cement mixer arrived 20 minutes ago. Karen's voice reached a fever pitch. This is an environmental catastrophe waiting to happen. After being transferred twice and placed on hold for what felt like an eternity, Karen was finally connected to Inspector Rodriguez, who agreed to come out sometime this afternoon to assess the situation. This afternoon? Karen sputtered. Sir, by this afternoon they could have created a concrete monolith that violates 17 different municipal codes. Ma'am, I understand your concern, but… Karen hung up and immediately dialed the non-emergency police line. If environmental services wouldn't take this seriously, maybe law enforcement would understand the urgency. Officer Thompson, this is Karen Pemberton. I've been corresponding with your department for years about various violations in my neighborhood. I need an immediate wellness check at 247 Maple Drive. The residents appear to be engaged in potentially dangerous construction activity without proper permits. By noon, Karen had made 14 phone calls, sent 7 emails, and compiled a 30-page report complete with photos she'd taken from her upstairs bedroom window using her husband's birdwatching binoculars. She'd contacted the building permit office, the water department, the fire marshal, and even the mayor's office. Each phone call had been met with the same bureaucratic indifference that made Karen's blood pressure spike. We'll look into it. Someone will be in touch. Please file a formal complaint. Nobody seemed to understand that this was an emergency requiring immediate action. As she stood at her kitchen window, watching the Martinez property like a hawk, Karen felt something she hadn't experienced in years. Doubt. Not about being right. She was absolutely right. But about whether anyone else cared about maintaining the standards that made communities livable. But then she saw Miguel Martinez walk out to his backyard, coffee mug in hand, and survey his empty pool with what looked suspiciously like satisfaction. The sight reignited every fiber of Karen's resolve. If the system wouldn't help her, she'd work within the system until the system had no choice but to listen. At 2:47 p.m., Karen's doorbell rang with the authority of someone who meant business. She opened it to find Officer Michael Thompson on her doorstep, looking remarkably calm for someone responding to what Karen considered a neighborhood emergency. Mrs. Pemberton, I'm here about your call regarding 247 Maple Drive. Officer Thompson, thank goodness. Karen's relief was palpable as she gestured him inside. I have everything documented right here. Photos, timestamps, witness statements from 4 neighbors, and a complete analysis of the violations. Ma'am, I need to stop you right there. Officer Thompson held up his hand with the practiced patience of someone who dealt with HOA disputes before. I spoke with Mr. Martinez about 20 minutes ago. He showed me his pool maintenance contract and the permits he filed last week. Everything appears to be in order. Karen's world tilted slightly off its axis. Permits? What permits? Pool cleaning and resurfacing permits through the county. They're doing a 3-day acid wash and resurface job. The concrete truck he reported was delivering materials to resurface the pool bottom, not fill it in permanently. For the first time in 15 years as HOA president, Karen Pemberton was speechless. The documentation she'd been so proud of suddenly felt heavy in her hands, like evidence of her own miscalculation. Karen's head snapped toward the voice. It was Sarah Martinez, Miguel's wife, sitting with 3 other families Karen didn't immediately recognize. When had they arrived? Mrs. Martinez, while I appreciate your perspective, Karen said, her voice taking on the patient tone she used with particularly difficult residents. The HOA exists to protect everyone's property values and maintain. No, Mrs. Pemberton. The HOA exists to serve the community, Sarah interrupted, standing up. And speaking for my family, we don't feel served when we're treated like criminals for maintaining our own property legally. A murmur of agreement rippled through the room. Karen felt something she hadn't experienced in 15 years. She was losing control of her own meeting. Furthermore, Sarah continued, we've been talking with other families, and we think it's time for some changes in how this HOA operates. Karen's heart began racing. Changes? For starters, we'd like to see more transparency in decision-making, real community input instead of unilateral rulings, and maybe some term limits for board positions. The room erupted in discussion. Karen heard fragments of conversations that made her stomach drop. Being president too long. Need fresh perspectives. Time for change. Order, Karen called out, but her voice cracked slightly. This meeting is about pool maintenance protocols, not. Actually, Mrs. Pemberton, Dave Chen said, consulting his copy of the HOA bylaws. According to Section 2.3, any homeowner can introduce new business during the open discussion period. I'd like to formally motion that we form a committee to review current HOA procedures and suggest reforms. Seconded, called out Bob Martinez from the back. Karen watched in horror as hands raised around the room. 7, 8, 9 hands in favor of the motion. Only 3 board members voted against it, including herself. The motion passed. As the meeting dissolved into working groups and animated discussions about community engagement and democratic processes, Karen found herself standing alone at the podium, her carefully prepared presentation still glowing on the screen behind her. For the first time in 15 years, Karen Pemberton realized that being right wasn't enough anymore. The community was changing, and she wasn't sure she was changing with it. But as she packed up her materials and watched the Martinez family laughing with their newfound allies, one thought crystallized in her mind. If the community wanted change, she'd make sure they understood exactly what they were giving up. After all, Karen Pemberton hadn't maintained order in Willowbrook for 15 years by giving up at the first sign of resistance. This was just the beginning of a much larger battle, and she intended to win it. The question was, what would be left of the community she'd worked so hard to protect?